Hi, my name is Margret. In this video, I'm going to introduce you to generic methods, and I'm going to do that by using the method swap. So here we have an array. It has 8 elements, and we want to swap 2 elements. Here I have an element on index 2. It's going to be placed on index 6, and my element from index 6 is going to be placed on index 2, and at the end I can see my 2 elements are swapped. When we write a program, we cannot move both of the elements at the same time. And if I would start by moving, let's say 60 to index 2, I would lose my value on that position. So I need a temporary variable. I create a temporary variable, store the element from the first index, then I copy the element from my second index down to my first index. My number 20 is no longer in the array, but we safely stored it in the temp variable here. And then we copy the value that we stored in temp in the array on the second index. And the result is that we exchanged or we swapped the 2 elements. Now we're going to do the equivalent in code. I created a class, demo generic methods, with a main method, and I'm going to start by adding an integer array. I call it numbers, and I'm going to initialize it with the numbers 0 to 70. Next, I'm going to create 2 variables, index 1 and index 2. My index 1 gets assigned 2, and my index 2 gets assigned 6. Now we're ready to write some code. Let's start by creating 2 indices, index 1 and index 2. I'm going to initialize index 1 with the value 2 and index 2 with the value 6. And now we're going to create a list of numbers, and we're going to assign it a new array list. We need an import statement from Java util. And now I'm going to use a method from class collections to initialize the list. We're going to add the elements in our list numbers. We're going to add the numbers 0, 10, 20, all the way up to 70. At this point, we are swapping the numbers on the 2 indices. I start by creating the temp variable, and I'm going to assign it the value on my first index. In our case, that happens to be 20. Now that I stored the value on my index 1 safely, I can overwrite the position index 1. And I'm going to place there whatever is stored on index 2. Now we're ready to place the value we stored in our temp variable on index 2. At that point, we should be finished swapping our 2 elements. It would be nice to see what we have. So I'm going to print my list before as the original list. And now I print the list again after swapping. So let's see how the output looks like. I'm going to run my program. And I can see my original list was 0 to 70, and the swapped list has the 2 elements 20 and 60 exchanged. Now that we did such a fine job swapping the elements in our number list, I want to create a second list. This time it is going to be a list of words. And I'm going to initialize my list with the following words. Let's say N, big, cow, day, elf, fun, git, and her. Now that I have a list of words, I would like to swap the words. I would like you to try that. Give yourself a moment, pause the video. When you're done, press continue. Here is something to compare it with. Because we have already a variable temp, I gave it a new name, temp2. It is otherwise very analogous we access the element on my first index. We are going to store it in the temp variable. We're going to bring the element on the second index to my position index 1, and then we store the element from my temp2 variable on the position index 2. Now there's one more thing. Right now I was printing my number list twice and my word list twice to make the output easier to read. We're going to add single empty lines. And I'm going to do something analogous here. When I look at the output, I can see cow and git got nicely swapped. When I look at my code, I can see that the swapping is very analogous. It's not exactly the same. One time I swap with integers, one time I swap with strings. But if I would decide I also would like to swap a list of characters, a list of points, a list of coordinates, whatever it might be, then we would have a lot of code duplication. So ideally, we could factor out or extract a method. And I can take the help from Eclipse here. So I can go to refactor and extract a method. And we're going to call this method swap. And it does a fantastic job for my numbers. So here I'm swapping my list of integers. If I try to use that swap method for my words, it wouldn't work because word is not a list of integers. So there might be the idea, couldn't we just have a list of objects? And when I try to do that, you can see that we get a problem with the integer list because a list of integer is not a list of objects. So that would not work. There is another way to avoid code duplication though. And what we can do is the following. We can add a type parameter right here before our return type. I'm going to say we are going to use the type which is called a t. And I no longer talk about integers. It's just whatever type t. It can be any reference type. Not a primitive type, but any other type in Java. And the same thing here, my temp variable has to be of that very type. I don't know what it is at this point. Could be any reference type, but we just call it t. Now notice, my swap method no longer has a problem. In that context, the t happens to be integer. Now I can call the same swap method for my words. Now I can say swap index 1, index 2, words. And that is perfectly fine because my words is a list of string. So in that context here, t is string. It's a list of string. We no longer need to duplicate the code here. Let's run the code one more time to prove that the functionality hasn't changed. And you can see the swapping still works the way it worked before. Cow and git is swapped, 60 and 20 are swapped.